Hello, I'm Essay, your AI essayist. Please note that all content, audio and video in this presentation are AI generated. As AI can sometimes produce inaccuracies, I encourage you to verify any factual information presented. With that in mind, let's begin.
The vast landscape of human endeavor, particularly within the realms of economic thought and policy, has long grappled with the persistent specter of poverty and the deep-seated inequalities that fracture societies. For decades, the intellectual currents in development, economics sought to untangle the intricate web of factors contributing to widespread deprivation, striving to devise strategies that could lift billions from hardship. As the 20th century yielded to the 21st, a palpable sense of frustration lingered. Traditional economic models, while offering elegant theoretical frameworks, often proved insufficient in providing clear, actionable insights into the lived realities of the impoverished. The grand pronouncements of macro-level interventions, the sweeping policy prescriptions, and the reliance on aggregate data, while aiming for broad impact, frequently obscured the granular realities that dictated the success or failure of initiatives on the ground. This era presented a critical juncture. Immense resources poured into development aid. The ambitious national and international programs and the dedicated efforts of countless individuals and organizations yielded outcomes that were, at best, uneven. The precise mechanisms through which poverty perpetuated itself, the subtle yet crucial behavioral responses of individuals to economic stimuli, and the nuanced effectiveness of specific interventions remained stubbornly elusive. It was akin to attempting to diagnose a complex ailment with only a general understanding of human anatomy, without the precise tools to pinpoint the source of the distress or to measure the efficacy of a proposed remedy. The challenge was profound: how to move beyond broad correlations and theoretical postulates to establish clear, causal links between specific actions and tangible improvements in human well-being. It was within this intellectual climate that Esther Duflo emerged, a meticulous architect of empirical investigation. Her early career trajectory was shaped by this very deficit in understanding. The prevailing methods, while contributing to the theoretical edifice of economics, struggled to provide the kind of granular, evidence-based feedback necessary for effective policy design and implementation. The problems were deeply embedded in the very fabric of development challenges. Understanding why a particular learning program dramatically improved school attendance, how microfinance loans truly impacted entrepreneurial activity, or what incentivized farmers to adopt new, more productive agricultural techniques. These were questions demanding more than abstract reasoning. They required direct, empirical engagement with the world. Duflo's approach signaled a significant departure, a reorientation of focus towards the micro level, towards the individual decisions and local contexts that, when aggregated, define the broader patterns of development. Her early work was characterized by an unwavering commitment to rigorous data collection and analysis, a desire to quantify the impact of specific interventions with the precision previously unseen in development economics. This was the genesis of a methodological revolution, a quiet but powerful insistence that the most effective path to understanding and alleviating poverty lay in the careful, systematic study of its constituent parts. The prevailing intellectual landscape, while rich in theoretical debate, often lacked the critical empirical grounding to definitively declare what worked for whom and under what specific circumstances. The complexity of socio-economic systems in developing nations presented formidable obstacles to isolating the impact of any single policy or program. Researchers and policymakers alike were often left navigating a sea of anecdotal evidence, correlational studies, and well-intentioned but unevaluated initiatives. The ability to discern cause from effect, to attribute improvements in economic indicators to specific policy levers, was severely hampered by the inherent interconnectedness of factors influencing poverty. This created a persistent ambiguity, a black box surrounding the actual effectiveness of many development interventions. The challenge was to illuminate this black box, to provide a clear, data-driven understanding of what truly moved the needle. The intellectual environment was ripe for a paradigm shift, a move away from broad, often untestable hypotheses towards a more grounded, experimental approach. The problems of their time were about the efficacy of the tools being deployed to combat poverty. The question became what works, and how do we know it works? This demand for verifiable evidence for a scientific basis to development policy set the stage for the profound impact of Duflo's work. Her intellectual journey was fundamentally driven by this imperative to bring the rigor and clarity of empirical science to bear on the most pressing human challenges of our era. The enduring relevance of these challenges, the persistent reality of global poverty and inequality, underscores the vital importance of the empirical foundations she helped to establish. The landscape of development economics, as it stood before the widespread influence of Esther Duflo's work, was characterized by a significant intellectual challenge: the difficulty in establishing clear causal links between interventions and outcomes in the complex, multifaceted reality of poverty. For decades, policymakers and researchers grappled with the question of which development strategies genuinely alleviated suffering and fostered sustainable progress, and which were, at best, ineffective or at worst, counterproductive. Prevailing methodologies frequently employed large-scale aggregate data analysis and theoretical models to explain broad economic trends. These approaches offered valuable insights into macro-level forces shaping economies, yet they often encountered difficulties in identifying the precise mechanisms through which specific programs or policies influenced individual lives and communities. The situation resembled observing an intricate machine without the ability to isolate the function of each individual gear or lever. Development interventions encompassing education, healthcare, agricultural support, or microfinance were introduced into environments already shaped by a multitude of social, cultural, political, and economic factors. Isolating the specific effect of a single intervention from this dense web of influences proved exceedingly challenging. Researchers might observe that a particular region experienced improvements in health outcomes following the establishment of a new clinic. However, determining whether this improvement stemmed directly from the clinic or from concurrent changes in sanitation practices, dietary habits, or even a general economic improvement enabling better care elsewhere was complex. The absence of a robust framework for establishing such causal relationships meant that the effectiveness of substantial development aid and numerous policy initiatives often relied on educated conjecture rather than empirically validated certainty. Theoretical models, while foundational to economic understanding, frequently operated at a level of abstraction that complicated the direct testing of specific policy levers. These models provided elegant explanations for aggregate phenomena, but translating their insights into actionable, evidence-based directives for poverty reduction on the ground presented a persistent hurdle. The opaque nature of poverty interventions meant that the intricate processes by which resources were transformed into improved well-being were often unclear. Without a clear understanding of the specific program elements driving success or failure, replicating effective strategies or learning from and correcting ineffective ones was difficult. This resulted in a cycle where well-intentioned initiatives were launched, often with significant investment, yielding ambiguous results and leaving policymakers without a clear mandate for future action. The ethical imperative to ensure that resources intended to alleviate suffering achieved their purpose added another layer of urgency to this challenge. Development aid, a colossal global undertaking, demanded accountability. The expectation grew that such significant investments should be demonstrably effective. effective, yet the tools to rigorously demonstrate this effectiveness were either underdeveloped or were applied inconsistently. The intellectual climate demanded a methodological approach capable of moving beyond correlation to causation, dissecting complex interventions into constituent parts, and providing clear, quantifiable evidence of impact. Within this context of significant methodological and empirical gaps, Esther Duflo's intellectual contributions began to take shape. Her approach was fundamentally rooted in a commitment to empirical rigor, a desire to understand the granular realities of poverty, and a belief in the power of systematic experimentation. She recognized that to truly understand what works in development, one needed to move beyond broad generalizations and engage in precise, localized analysis. The problem of establishing causality in development economics required a deliberate and disciplined application of scientific principles. Duflo, alongside her collaborators, championed the systematic and scaled application of randomized controlled trials, or RCT, as a primary tool for macro-level analysis in development economics. This represented a profound methodological shift in how development interventions were conceived, implemented, and evaluated. RCTs offered a powerful means to overcome the limitations of observational studies and theoretical models by creating controlled environments where the impact of a specific intervention could be isolated and measured with a high degree of confidence. The core idea behind an RCT in development is elegantly simple, yet its execution demands meticulous planning and adherence to scientific principles. When evaluating a new program, such as a program providing educational materials to primary school students, an RCT would involve randomly assigning individuals or communities to either receive the intervention, the treatment group, or a comparable group that does not receive it, the control group. Because the assignment is random, the two groups are, on average, statistically identical in all respects except for the intervention itself. Any subsequent differences observed between the groups in outcomes of interest, such as test scores or attendance rates, can then be attributed with a high degree of certainty to the intervention. This direct comparison allowed for a clear understanding of the causal effect of the program. This methodical approach provided a powerful antidote to the ambiguity that had long plagued development policy, offering a way to move beyond anecdotal evidence or correlational studies. Observing that communities receiving a particular type of agricultural training also experienced higher crop yields might be misleading if those communities also happened to receive more rainfall or had better access to markets. An RCT could isolate the effect of the training itself by comparing communities that received the training with similar communities that did receive it, thereby controlling for these other confounding factors. The impact of this approach was to transform the understanding of development effectiveness from a realm of broad theories and often inconclusive evidence to one grounded in rigorous, data-driven insights. It allowed for a nuanced understanding of what worked, for whom, and under what specific conditions. This was a critical step in advancing development economics from a field often criticized for its lack of empirical grounding to one that could offer precise, actionable recommendations supported by robust evidence. The modern relevance of this methodological commitment lies in its ongoing influence on evidence-based policymaking across a wide array of disciplines, underscoring the enduring power of empirical inquiry to address complex societal challenges. The discourse surrounding development economics often grapple with the fundamental challenge, the chasm separating abstract theoretical frameworks from the tangible realities faced by individuals living in poverty. For decades, policymakers and practitioners relied on broad assumptions and anecdotal evidence to guide interventions, leading to a landscape where the efficacy of aid was frequently debated but seldom definitively quantified. The problems of their time were characterized by pervasive uncertainty about what truly fostered progress, a lack of granular understanding of causality, and an ethical imperative to ensure that limited resources yielded maximum positive impact. Development efforts, while often well-intentioned, could inadvertently perpetuate cycles of ineffectiveness if their underlying assumptions about human behavior and economic mechanisms remained untested against the crucible of real-world application. Esther Duflo, alongside her collaborators, championed a profound methodological shift, advocating for the rigorous application of randomized controlled trials as the cornerstone for building a science of the possible within development. This was an epistemological commitment, a dedication to understanding what interventions worked, for whom they worked, and under what precise circumstances they yielded their intended effects. The innovation lay in employing statistical techniques and reorienting the very ethos of development research. Instead of inferring impact from broad correlations or relying on pronouncements of established theories, Duflo's approach sought to isolate causal mechanisms through carefully designed experiments. This meant creating control groups that mirrored intervention groups in all relevant respects, save for the specific program or policy being tested. By meticulously observing the differential outcomes between these groups, researchers could attribute changes directly to the intervention, thereby generating robust evidence of its effectiveness. This commitment to empirical precision provided a powerful counterpoint to the prevailing reliance on intuition and generalized models. It offered a path toward understanding the intricate details of poverty alleviation, moving toward a nuanced appreciation of context. The goal was to build actionable knowledge to equip policymakers with the clarity needed to design and implement programs that genuinely improved lives. This involved a deep engagement with the specific challenges faced by populations, recognizing that solutions effective in one setting might prove less so in another. The randomized controlled trial in this framework became a mechanism for discovery, a way to systematically uncover the most effective levers for positive change in the complex machinery of human development. The ethical dimension of this approach cannot be overstated. In a world where resources for development are perpetually scarce and the need is immeasurable, an evidence-based strategy offered a profound moral advantage. It meant that decisions about how to allocate funds, design programs, and implement policies could be informed by reliable data, minimizing the risk of wasting precious resources on ineffective initiatives. This dedication to empirical validation was a direct response to the ethical imperative to ensure that every dollar spent, every program launched, contributed meaningfully to the well-being of those it aimed to serve. It fostered accountability, allowing for a clear assessment of what interventions succeeded and what lessons could be learned from those that did. The modern relevance of this methodological commitment is profound and far-reaching. The principles championed by Duflo continue to shape how we approach challenges across a vast spectrum of fields, extending well beyond development economics. The insistence on rigorous empirical testing, on isolating causal relationships, and on understanding context-specific effectiveness has become a hallmark of evidence-based policymaking globally. Whether in education, public health, environmental policy, or social welfare programs, the legacy of this approach is the elevation of data and systematic inquiry as indispensable guides for effective action. It underscores the enduring power of empirical research to illuminate complex societal problems and to forge pathways toward more effective and equitable solutions, transforming the landscape of how we understand and address the most pressing issues of our time. The pursuit of understanding what works, for whom, and under what conditions remains a critical endeavor, and the rigorous empirical methods advocated by Duflo provide the essential framework for this vital work. This systematic inquiry has profoundly reshaped our comprehension of interventions designed to foster human development, particularly within the realms of education and public health. For decades, the persistent challenge of low educational attainment and endemic health issues in developing nations presented a complex puzzle. Policymakers and practitioners grappled with the efficacy of various programs aimed at improving school attendance, learning outcomes, and the general well-being of populations. Traditional approaches often relied on broad assumptions about human behavior and the presumed impact of introducing resources, such as building schools or distributing medicines. However, the actual on-the-ground effectiveness of these initiatives frequently proved elusive, with outcomes often falling short of expectations. The fundamental problem was a lack of precise knowledge which specific interventions yielded tangible improvements, and what were the precise mechanisms driving those changes. It was exceedingly difficult to disentangle the effects of a particular program from the myriad of other social and economic factors at play. Esther Duflo, collaborating with colleagues like Abhijit Banerjee and Michael Kremer, pioneered the application of randomized controlled trials, or RCT, to rigorously evaluate these development programs. This methodology, borrowed from the medical field, offered a powerful means to isolate causal relationships by randomly assigning individuals or communities to receive a particular intervention or a control group that did not. Researchers could directly measure the impact of the intervention itself. This provided a stark contrast to observational studies, which could only identify correlations, leaving open the question of whether the observed effects were truly attributable to the program or to pre-existing differences between groups. One seminal area of Duflo's research involved the impact of education. The problem of children not attending school or attending but not learning was a pervasive issue. Duflo and her collaborators embarked on studies to understand the drivers of these educational deficits. For instance, a notable series of experiments investigated the effectiveness of various approaches to improving school attendance and performance. They tested the impact of providing textbooks, uniforms, and attendance incentives, meticulously measuring how these specific inputs influence student behavior and learning. The findings revealed nuanced insights. Providing uniforms or textbooks could increase attendance, with the impact on actual learning often being modest. This suggested that the problems ran deeper than mere material provision, pointing towards issues with teacher quality, curriculum relevance, or the underlying motivation of students and their families. Further expanding this line of inquiry, Duflo's work illuminated the critical connection between health and education. Poor health, particularly among children, is a significant impediment to cognitive development and school attendance. The problem of parasitic infections, such as intestinal worms, was widespread in many low-income countries, leading to malnutrition, anemia, and reduced cognitive function. In collaboration with Michael Kremer, Duflo conducted groundbreaking research on the impact of deworming programs. They implemented large-scale randomized controlled trials in Canada, providing children with deworming medication at regular intervals. The results were striking. Children who received deworming treatment exhibited improved school attendance, higher test scores, and even increased future earnings. This research provided compelling empirical evidence that a relatively inexpensive health intervention could have profound and lasting effects on educational and economic outcomes. It demonstrated that addressing basic health needs was a crucial prerequisite for effective educational investment. Another facet of their educational research explored the impact of pedagogical methods, recognizing that simply sending children to school was insufficient. Duflo and her team investigated how teaching practices could be improved. Experiments were designed to test the effectiveness of different teaching strategies, such as providing additional support to struggling students or implementing more engaging classroom activities. These studies provided actionable insights for educators and policymakers, highlighting teaching methods that yielded the greatest gains in student comprehension and retention. The emphasis was always on empirical validation, moving towards data-driven conclusions about what truly worked in the classroom. The modern relevance of this body of work is immense. The global community continues to strive for universal access to quality education and healthcare. The insights gleaned from Duflo's randomized controlled trials inform ongoing policy decisions in countries across the globe. When governments and international organizations design interventions to improve schooling or public health, they increasingly rely on the evidence base established through rigorous empirical testing. The understanding that seemingly simple interventions like deworming can have transformative effects on human capital underscores the importance of targeted, evidence-based approaches. This research has shifted the paradigm from assuming what might work to empirically demonstrating what does, fostering a more efficient and effective allocation of resources towards achieving developmental goals. The legacy of this work is a generation of development professionals and policymakers equipped with a more nuanced and data-informed understanding of how to foster human potential, recognizing that improvements in education and health are deeply intertwined and require precise, empirically tested solutions. The journey through the landscape of development economics reveals a profound evolution in understanding the mechanisms that perpetuate poverty and hinder progress. Following the foundational insights into human capital, particularly in education and health, the focus naturally shifts to the economic behaviors and constraints that shape daily life for billions. For those dwelling in the margins of the global economy, particularly in agrarian societies and underserved communities, productivity and access to essential financial tools represent critical junctures where small shifts can yield substantial improvements. The prevailing assumptions of the past often painted a picture of individuals making perfectly rational economic choices, a model that, while elegant in its theoretical framework, frequently failed to capture the complex realities of decision-making under conditions of scarcity, uncertainty, and limited information. The problems of their time were starkly evident in the persistent low yields in agriculture across many developing nations, a sector that formed the backbone of many economies. Farmers, often operating with traditional methods and facing unpredictable environmental factors, struggled to adopt innovations that could significantly boost their output. Simultaneously, a vast segment of the population remained excluded from formal financial systems, denied access to credit, savings, and insurance mechanisms that could provide a buffer against shocks and a pathway to investment. The prevailing wisdom often attributed these challenges to a lack of knowledge or a fundamental unwillingness to engage with more efficient practices. However, the actual barriers were far more intricate, rooted in behavioral economics and the practical limitations of daily life. Esther Duflo, alongside her collaborators, embarked on a systematic empirical investigation into these micro-level economic decisions, employing the rigorous framework of randomized controlled trials. Their work in agriculture, for instance, examined fundamental questions about fertilizer adoption. The economic theory suggested that if fertilizer increased yields, farmers would embrace it. Yet, empirical observation showed a perplexing reluctance. Duflo and her colleagues designed trials that moved beyond simply offering fertilizer. They explored the impact of simplifying information, breaking down large quantities into smaller, more manageable purchases, and providing tailored advice. The results were illuminating. Small adjustments, such as offering fertilizers in smaller bags or delivering them directly to villages, significantly increased adoption rates. This demonstrated that the decision to use fertilizer was also influenced by the upfront costs, the logistical challenges of transport, and the cognitive load of managing complex inputs. The problem of their time was an oversimplified view of farmer behavior. The solution lay in understanding and addressing the practical, behavioral frictions that impeded the adoption of beneficial technologies. This granular approach extended powerfully into the realm of financial inclusion, for individuals living on very little, saving or taking out a loan often carried significant risks and complexities. Traditional banking models, with their stringent collateral requirements and complex application processes, were largely inaccessible. Duflo's research explored how financial products could be redesigned to meet the specific needs of the poor. Trials investigated the impact of offering small, flexible savings accounts, microinsurance against crop failure or illness, and loans with simplified repayment schedules. One notable line of inquiry examined the effectiveness of commitment savings accounts, where individuals could deposit money with restrictions on immediate withdrawal, aiding them in achieving long-term goals like education or business investment. The findings revealed that when financial services were made more accessible, understandable, and aligned with behavioral patterns, such as providing reminders or offering small incentives for saving, participation and positive outcomes increased dramatically. The challenge of their time was a financial system that failed to adapt to the realities of poverty. The solution involved empirically testing product designs that acknowledged and worked with the behavioral economics of low-income individuals. The power of Duflo's approach, mirrored in her extensive work with the Pidgeot Banerjee and Michael Kremer, lies in its unwavering commitment to empirical evidence. They meticulously designed experiments to isolate the causal impact of specific interventions, allowing them to identify what truly drove behavioral change and improved outcomes. The insights gleaned were often subtle yet profound. They showed that economic decision-making is deeply embedded in context, influenced by cognitive biases, social norms, and the immediate environment. For instance, understanding that individuals may have hyperbolic discounting, valuing immediate rewards more highly than future ones, led to the design of interventions that provided immediate, albeit small, benefits for engaging in beneficial long-term behaviors. The modern relevance of this micro-level economic research is profound and far-reaching. The insights into agricultural productivity had informed the design of extension services and input delivery systems worldwide, helping to lift millions out of subsistence farming. The pioneering work on financial inclusion has reshaped the landscape of microfinance, leading to the development of more responsible and effective products that empower individuals and communities. Governments and non-governmental organizations now routinely employ principles derived from these empirical studies when designing programs aimed at poverty reduction, recognizing that effective interventions are built on a deep, evidence-based understanding of how people actually behave. This empirical grounding has fostered a more nuanced and effective approach to development, one that prioritizes precise interventions tailored to specific contexts and informed by the lived realities of those they aim to serve. The legacy of this work is a more pragmatic, data-driven approach to tackling complex global challenges, demonstrating that even small, well-designed changes can catalyze significant and lasting improvements in human well-being. A profound transformation began to take root in the discourse surrounding global development. For decades, the field had grappled with the complexities of poverty, its causes, and its remedies. The dialogue often found itself adrift, swayed by ideological currents and grand, sweeping theories that frequently lacked the grounding of rigorous, empirical validation. The challenge was clear: to move beyond conjecture and establish a systematic, evidence-based approach that could reliably guide interventions and illuminate the path towards genuine progress for the world's most vulnerable populations. The existing landscape offered a fragmented picture, where well-intentioned policies often yielded disappointing results, leaving policymakers and practitioners searching for a more dependable compass. Esther Duflo, alongside her esteemed colleagues, emerged as a pivotal force in charting this new course. Her contribution was the championing of a methodological revolution. The randomized controlled trial, a staple in fields like medicine and agriculture, began to find its powerful place within the intricate domain of development economics. Duflo's vision extended far beyond the individual experiment. She recognized that the true power of this approach lay in its systematic and widespread adoption, its integration into the very fabric of how development policy was conceived, implemented, and evaluated. This was a call to build an infrastructure for evidence, a framework that could support the continuous generation, analysis, and dissemination of insights derived from real-world experimentation. The establishment of the Abdul-Latif Jamil Poverty Action Lab, or JPAL, at the Massachusetts Institute of Technology stands as a testament to this visionary ambition. JPAL became a global engine for evidence-based policymaking. Its mission was to ensure that policy decisions were informed by deep understanding of what works, for whom, and under what circumstances. Duflo and her collaborators meticulously cultivated a network of researchers, policymakers, and practitioners, fostering a collaborative environment where rigorous empirical investigation could directly inform actionable strategies. This institutional effort was crucial in elevating the randomized controlled trial from a specialized technique to a cornerstone of modern development practice. The process of embedding this methodology within the development community required both intellectual persuasion and practical demonstration. Duflo's work provided the latter, showcasing through compelling empirical results how seemingly small, precisely targeted interventions could yield significant improvements in areas such as education, health, and economic opportunity. The prevailing skepticism and the inertia of established practices presented challenges. The solution lay in the patient, persistent accumulation of evidence, presented with clarity and intellectual honesty. Duflo's ability to articulate complex findings in accessible, yet rigorous, terms was instrumental in bridging the gap between academic research and policy implementation. This systematic approach fostered a paradigm shift, moving the conversation from broad pronouncements about development to granular inquiries into the efficacy of specific programs. The focus embraced understanding the causal mechanisms through which interventions impacted people's lives. This meant asking pointed questions: did providing textbooks improve educational outcomes? Did distributing insecticide-treated bed nets meaningfully reduce malaria incidents? Did cash transfers empower recipients to invest in their futures? The answers, painstakingly gathered through meticulously designed randomized trials, provided a robust empirical foundation that had previously been elusive. The impact of this methodological embrace reverberated across the global development landscape. Governments, international organizations, and non-governmental agencies increasingly turned to evidence generated through randomized evaluations to guide their resource allocation and program design. The days of relying solely on intuition or ideological preference began to recede, replaced by growing demand for data-driven insights. JPAL's network expanded, establishing regional bureaus and fostering a global community of researchers committed to the principles of evidence-based policymaking. This institutional scaffolding enabled the replication and adaptation of successful interventions across diverse contexts, accelerating the pace of learning and innovation in the field. The modern relevance of this institutionalization is profound. Today, a vast global network of researchers and policymakers actively engages with randomized controlled trials as a standard tool for evaluating development interventions. This methodology has become integral to the design and assessment of programs aimed at alleviating poverty, improving public health, and fostering economic growth. The continuous effort to refine these techniques to address ethical considerations and to explore their limitations ensures that the pursuit of evidence remains dynamic and responsive to the evolving challenges of development. The legacy is a more accountable, more effective, and more humane approach to addressing the world's most pressing problems, grounded in the unwavering commitment to understanding what truly makes a difference in the lives of those striving for a better future. Esther Duflo's intellectual journey, marked by relentless pursuit of empirical understanding, has fundamentally reshaped the landscape of development economics. Her work, alongside Abhijit Banerjee and Michael Kremer, has championed a rigorous, evidence-based approach to tackling global poverty, moving the discipline from broad theoretical pronouncements to granular, context-specific solutions. This methodological revolution, centered on the careful application of randomized controlled trials, has yielded a deeper comprehension of the complex realities faced by the world's most vulnerable populations. The culmination of this extensive research effort lies in the institutionalization of a scientific ethos within development policy. Duflo and her collaborators have demonstrated, through decades of meticulous fieldwork and analysis, that understanding the efficacy of interventions requires direct observation and systematic experimentation. Their approach prioritizes the generation of robust data to inform decision-making. This commitment to empirical validation has fostered a new paradigm where the effectiveness of programs, from providing enduring medication to improving educational outcomes or delivering microfinance, is assessed through the lens of scientific inquiry. The impact of this methodological shift is evident in the widespread adoption of randomized controlled trials as a cornerstone for evaluating development initiatives. What was once a nascent, even controversial approach is now a standard practice within major international organizations, governmental bodies, and philanthropic foundations. This widespread acceptance signifies a profound maturation of the field, reflecting a collective recognition that effective poverty alleviation demands a nuanced understanding of causality, achievable through carefully designed empirical studies. The ability to isolate the impact of specific interventions to understand why certain programs succeed in one context and falter in another is a direct consequence of this commitment to scientific rigor. The legacy of Duflo's work extends beyond the mere application of a particular research design. It embodies a broader philosophy that the most effective pathways to improving human well-being are discovered through a process of continuous learning and adaptation. By breaking down complex development challenges into smaller, manageable questions, her research has allowed for the incremental building of knowledge. Each randomized, controlled trial, each carefully analyzed dataset, contributes to a growing body of evidence that guides the design of more impactful and efficient programs. This iterative process of hypothesis, experimentation, and refinement mirrors the progress seen in other scientific disciplines, bringing a similar level of precision and accountability to the study of human development. The modern relevance of this institutionalization is profound. Today, a vast global network of researchers and policymakers actively engages with randomized controlled trials as a standard tool for evaluating development interventions. This methodology has become integral to the design and assessment of programs aimed at alleviating poverty, improving public health, and fostering economic growth. The continuous effort to refine these techniques, to address ethical considerations, and to explore their limitations ensures that the pursuit of evidence remains dynamic and responsive to the evolving challenges of development. The legacy is a more accountable, more effective, and more humane approach to addressing the world's most pressing problems, grounded in the unwavering commitment to understanding what truly makes a difference in the lives of those striving for a better future. Duflo's contribution lies in democratizing the generation and application of knowledge, empowering a new generation of economists and policymakers to engage directly with the empirical realities of poverty, fostering a global movement dedicated to evidence-informed progress.
We really appreciate you tuning into this AI-powered presentation. Our goal is to push the boundaries of AI in content creation, and your input is invaluable. If there's a particular subject you'd like to see us tackle next, or if you have suggestions on how we could fine-tune our AI's creative prompts, please don't hesitate to leave your ideas in the comments section. We're excited to bring you more unique content very soon.